Hello everyone, welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We are holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Hel. We'll be learning today Mi'at Hashem Daf Kuf Nun Aleph Amid Beis. We're continuing to learn Hilchas Yom Tov. We're holding in Siman Tov Kuf Chav Zayin. We're discussing the halachas of eiruv tavshilin. And we begin today on the top line of Kuf Nun Aleph Amid Beis with Sif Yud Tes. Now before I read Sif Yud Tes, the truth is this is something that I should have spoken about all the way at the beginning of the Siman, and I'm not sure if I did. I'm not sure if I ever spoke it out clearly. But so that we have a proper understanding of the mechanics of eiruv tavshilin, there's one basic thing that we need to know, and that is that with the eiruv tavshilin, we are being matir malacha, we're being matir you to do malacha that would otherwise be an iser midrabanan. We can't use an eiruv tavshilin to be matir something that would be an iser midaraisa. Eiruv tavshilin is only a derabanan dika concept, so we can't use it to be matir a daraisa. We're only using it to be matir something which otherwise would be an iser midrabanan. Now, having said that, we need to understand without the eiruv tavshilin, what exactly would be the status of these malachas that we're doing on Yom Tov for Shabbos. So, for a proper understanding of that, we have to understand the machlokes Rav Chisda and Rabbah. Rav Chisda holds that in reality, to do malacha on Yom Tov in preparation for Shabbos would be mutter midaraisa. And that's because, according to most Rishonim, I think, that Rav Chisda holds that Yom Tov and Shabbos are considered the same type of Kedusha. They're considered Kedusha Achas. So according to Rav Chisda, to be mechin, to do some kind of malacha for Hachana from Yom Tov for Shabbos is really mutter min HaTorah. There's only an Issa D'Rabbanan. Why is there an Issa D'Rabbanan? Because to do malacha on Yom Tov for Chayil, that Rav Chisda holds would be an Issa D'Oraisa. So Rav Chisda says, since to do malacha from Yom Tov to Chayil to the weekday in preparation for the weekday is an Issa D'Oraisa, so the Chachamim were geyser, they said you also can't do malacha on Yom Tov for Shabbos, even though min HaTorah that would be mutter. Now we use an eiruv tavshilin to be matir the Issa D'Rabbanan of being mechin from Yom Tov for Shabbos. That's according to Rav Chisda. Rabbah holds not that way. Rabbah holds that really there would be an Issa D'Oraisa. Rabbah holds that the same way there would be an Issa D'Oraisa to do malacha to be mechin from Yom Tov for the Chayil, there also would be an Issa D'Oraisa to be mechin from Yom Tov to Shabbos. He doesn't hold that it's a Kedusha Achas. He considers Yom Tov and Shabbos to be two different types of Kedushais, and therefore to be mechin on Yom Tov for Shabbos would really be an Issa D'Oraisa. Oh, so if it's an Issa D'Oraisa, how do we employ an eiruv tavshilin in order to be matir it? Like I said, we can't use an eiruv tavshilin to be matir an Issa D'Oraisa, so how does the eiruv tavshilin work? So the way it works is, Rabbah holds that we use the svara of Hayel Miklai Archim. What Rabbah says is, what are these malachas that we're being matir? We're being matir you to put up a chicken soup on Yom Tov for Shabbos. Well, maybe guests will come. And therefore you'll need the chicken soup on Yom Tov. You're putting up a chalent, okay, maybe you'll need the chalent on Yom Tov. So Rabbah employs two things. First, he employs the concept of Hayel Miklai Archim to take off the Issa D'Oraisa. He says that really we could look at the malacha that you're doing as being a tzarich Yom Tov, and therefore it's not Asar Midaraisa. Oh, but there's still an Issa D'Rabbanan. The Issa Midarabanan we take off with the eiruv tavshilin. And that's why, all the way in the beginning of Siman Tov Kuf Chav Zayin, on Kuf Bem Ches Amid Beis in Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Gimel, the Mishnah Berurah brought down that when Yom Tov is on Erev Shabbos, Yizaher lahaktim hachanas ma'achalav l'Shabbos b'chdei sheyigamer malachtoi ba'od Yom Gadol. He says that really, the Achronim write, he brings this down from the Magen Avram and others, that really you should make sure to do your Shabbos preparation early in the day on Erev Shabbos, when Erev Shabbos is Yom Tov, so that the food should be ready, so that you should be able to employ the svara of Hayel Miklai Archim. If you put up the chalent right before Shabbos, there's no way the chalent is going to be ready, then you don't have Hayel Miklai Archim, and then you have a lusa of a malacha d'oraisa. You might have a d'oraisa problem, according to Rabbah, and then the eiruv tavshilin would not work. Okay, so to sum it up, either way, both according to Rav Chisda and according to Rabbah, either way, the erev tavshilin is only coming to be matir, something that would otherwise be an issa d'Rabbanan. According to Rav Chisda, preparation from Yom Tov for Shabbos is always only an issa d'Rabbanan. According to Rabbah, it would be an issa d'Oraisa. The reason it's an issa d'Rabbanan is because of Hayla Meklai Archim. What Hayla Meklai Archim does is it says that the malacha that you're doing is really a tzarech Yom Tov gufa. Really, you're doing it for Yom Tov because maybe guests will come. That's what makes it a d'Rabbanan. And then the erev tavshilin takes off the issa d'Rabbanan. Now, with that hakdama, let's see Sif Yud Tes. Says the Mechaber, Mi shaloi erev. Let's say somebody neglected to make an erev tavshilin. He forgot his erev tavshilin, and he doesn't have any other erev tavshilin that he could rely on. So we're not getting into right now the question of, okay, he didn't make an erev tavshilin. Maybe he could rely on the erev tavshilin of the gadol ha'ir. Maybe this fellow lives out in the boondocks, and there is no gadol ha'ir. There's nobody by him who made an erev tavshilin. So he didn't make an erev tavshilin, and he has no erev tavshilin that he could rely on. Mi shaloi erev. Mutar lahadlik ner shel Shabbos. He's allowed to light a ner for Shabbos. Pashtus, I assume this means ner shel Shabbos is the Shabbos licht. They could sin Shabbos licht. However, v'yesh oisrim, but there are those that say that this is aser. Okay, let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah here. Mishnah Berurah is cutting nundal. It says mutar lahadlik. You're allowed to light a ner. Why? The lahadlakas haner ein tzarich eiruv. Says the Chavetz Chaim. For hadlakas haner, you don't need an eiruv. Okay, let's just finish this Mishnah Berurah. Uladeyazu, and according to this opinion that holds that for hadlakas ner you don't require an erev tavshilin at all. Uladeyazu ein oimrim benusach bahadain eruva ulaadluke shraga. We brought down the nusach that you say when you make the erev tavshilin, and we said you say bahadain eruva with this eruv it should be mutter. Levashala or la'afa, it should be mutter for us to cook and to bake. And we said you also say ula'adluke shraga, to light a candle. According to this shita that holds that hadlakas haner is mutter without an erev tavshilin, then there's no reason to say ula'adluke shraga in the nusach of erev tavshilin. Now, why would there be a shita that holds that you could do hadlakas haner on Yom Tov for Shabbos without an erev tavshilin? Like we just said, both according to Rav Chisda, both according to Rabbah, it would certainly be an issa d'Rabbanan. You're doing a malacha on Yom Tov for Shabbos, so it should be an issa d'Rabbanan, and absent an erev tavshilin, how you matir the issa d'Rabbanan. And even more, according to Rabbah, if you're doing the hadlakas haner and there is absolutely no purpose of it for Yom Tov, so then that's even an issa d'Oraisa. What kind of tzarech Yom Tov do you necessarily have? So there are many different things that are said over here. The easiest way to understand this is from the Aruch HaShulchan. The Aruch HaShulchan says very simple. The Aruch HaShulchan says that hadlakas haner doesn't require an erev tavshilin because hadlakas haner can always be looked at as being a tzarech Yom Tov gufa. There are many reasons that you might want to light a candle on Yom Tov. There's many reasons why lighting a candle on Yom Tov would be considered a tzarech Yom Tov without getting into Hayla Meklai Archim. When are you lighting the candles? If you're lighting the candles right before Shabbos, so it's near the end of the day, even if it's not dark, I mean, obviously you have to light it before Shkia, but you're lighting the candles, it's already near the end of the day. It's already getting dim outside. Now you'll tell me it's not mamish dark. Let me tell you something. There are some people that like more light. There are some people that like less light. I have some family members that are not happy unless I have 300 watts of light in their small bedroom. Right now, when I'm doing this video, how many watts am I running over here? I have 300 watts in the ceiling. I have two video lights that are probably at least 350 watts each. And I have this desk lamp. I don't even know how many watts this is. And I have the window open. So some people like a lot of light. And when you do have a lot of light, it makes people more besimcha. Neiros makes simcha. So there are many reasons to argue that you don't need an erev tavshilin for hadlakas haner, says the Aruch HaShulchan. Let me see if I have his lashon right here. I think I prepared it. His lashon over here is, he brings a raya. He brings a raya earlier from Siman Taf Kuf Yud Dalid. Over here in the Aruch HaShulchan there's a toyus. It says Sif Tes. It shouldn't be Sif Tes. It should be Sif Hey. Siman Taf Kuf Yud Dalid Sif Hey. We learned over there in the Mechaber, we learned the halacha that on Yom Tov Sheni, forget Erev Shabbos. Yom Tov is Monday and Tuesday. So on Yom Tov Sheni, Tuesday afternoon, let's say it's late in the day on Tuesday, you're allowed to go light a candle. Now, the chiddush of that is, you're allowed to go light a candle. Why don't we say it looks like you're lighting the candle on Yom Tov for the chayil, for the weekday, for Matzah Yom Tov? No. The answer is that if it's already late in the day on Yom Tov Sheni, you're allowed to light a candle because it's already getting dim outside. So this shita holds that Hadlokas Haner doesn't even need an eiruv tavshilin. And therefore, says the Mechaber, based on this opinion, Mishalai eiruv mutar lahadlik ner shel Shabbos, because you don't even need an eiruv tavshilin. It's not necessary. His lashon over here in Aruch HaShulchan, the Nisbar b'Siman Taf Kuf Yodalad the mutar lahadlik afilu b'Yom Tov Sheni achar mincha v'lo yehavi kemechad l'chayil. Why? Mishum detzarach la la'isa shah, because you need the candle now on Yom Tov. Kalaymer sheteyer ba'isa shah atzmo. We want the light right now. B'hiyos hayom karav lehistalik. Im kain kolshken shemot lahadlik b'Yom Tov b'shvil la'isa shah atzma. So you're lighting on erev Shabbos on Yom Tov. You could say that you're lighting the candle for the use now. Umemela yishar gam l'Shabbos. V'chein ner la'nias daiti ikar. V'im yishum shemadlik ner is harbe. So you'll want to argue, but this person, Kedai Nari, has a large family. They're lighting 16 neiros. Okay. Sometimes people like lighting a lot of neiros. It's funny because I remember, I think it was by Sandy. I think it was by Hurricane Sandy, not by Hurricane Irene. I was living in Edison then, and I was saying the Daf Yomi shir, and I had to prepare the daf, and we had no power. And I said, all right, listen, people learned before there were electric lights, right? People learned by candlelight. So I said, okay, so I'll prepare the daf by candlelight. Boy, did I light a lot of neiros in order to be able... I need a lot of light. My eyes aren't very good. But boy, did I light. Remember, I took out the Shabbos neiros, all of them. I took out a whole bunch. I needed a lot of candles in order to be able to see the page well, in order to be able to prepare the daf. So you can't argue that somebody is lighting a lot of neiros. Okay, so that was Mishnah Berurah Eis Katan Nun Daled. But then the Mechaber brought down V'yesh Eisrim. He brought down, there are those that say that absent an eiruv tavshilin, you're not allowed to be madlik an air. Says the Mishnah Berurah Eis Katan Nun Hey V'yesh Eisrim. Harbe achroinim hiskimu. Many achroinim agree, and he brings down over here in Shabbos Eis Katan Nun Ches, the Magen Avram, Chem and Moshe, and others. I heard something turn off, but everything seems to be still working. Okay. Harbe achroinim hiskimu de ikar kedeyazu. Many achroinim agree that the halacha really follows, the ikar is, like this shita that holds that hadlakas haner without an eiruv tavshilin is aser. And the raya is that in our nusach of making the eiruv, we do say lad luke shraga. So it does seem that hadlakas neres does require an eiruv tavshilin. The gamzen niter al yudei eiruv, and we need the eiruv tavshilin to be matir lighting a ner as well. It's also a malacha, and you are doing it for Shabbos, especially the Shabbos licht themselves. It's kind of obvious that you're doing it for Shabbos. The wife is making a bracha on l'adlik ner shel Shabbos. Elo de imheniach eruv v'loy amar, even though they hold that you need the eiruv tavshilin to be matir l'adluke shraga, to be matir lighting a candle, but still they're maskim de miniach eruv if you made an eiruv tavshilin. V'loy amar, and you did not say la'adluke shraga in the nusach, ein aser b'di'eved. B'di'eved, it won't be aser to light the licht. De memela nigrar gamzeh, because once you said to cook and to bake, or lemebad kol tzarchana, and to do everything else that we need, la'adluke shraga is included. Avalam lo yiniach klal, but if you didn't make an eiruv tavshilin at all, aser, it would be aser to light a candle. V'rak ner echad mutar lahadlik b'chol oifen, like we're going to see in Sifchaf. We're going to say that even if you didn't make an eiruv tavshilin at all, no matter what, it's always going to be mutar to light one candle. That the Chazal were always matter for you. They were matter your basic necessities. They were matter. V'yesh bekilin keder rishon lahadlik kol masha roitza. There are those that are makel like the first opinion, that Hadluke Shraga doesn't need an eruv tavshilin at all, and they say you could light as many licht as you want. But now again, for us, halacha lamaisa, it's almost hard to imagine where this would really come up. I mean, you have somebody who forgot to make an eiruv tavshilin, and then he forgot the next Yom Tov as well. He forgot 2 Yom Tovim in a row. So now you have, with the halacha that we learned, that now he's nikra pesheya, and now he's not nichlal in the eiruv of the gadol ha'ir. He can't rely on the Rav's eiruv. But then again, we had the Aruch HaShulchan that seems to be very makel and says that you can't even call that person a pesheya, and he would be included in the Rav's eiruv tavshilin. So then, especially for something like a mitzvah, for neiros mitzvah of neiros Shabbos, I would think you could be samech on that. Also, I mean, I spoke to a Pesach this morning who told me that, look, halacha lamaisa, even if there's no eiruv tavshilin to rely on, we're going to turn around. It's very possible to say, like this Aruch HaShulchan that I read to you before, that the lighting of neiros could always be considered a simchas Yom Tov. It could always be considered to be a tzarich Yom Tov itself. All right, but even according to Rabbah, even if it's a tzarich Yom Tov, so what? So you still need an eiruv tavshilin. All right, listen, if the shayla comes up, you'll ask a shayla. Okay. So now we go to Sivchaf. Mi shaloi eiruv, if somebody did not make an eiruv tavshilin, sha'asa lavasha la'atzmai, kishem sha'asa lavasha la'atzmai, the same way he's not allowed to cook for himself, kach asa lavasha la'acherim, he's also not allowed to cook for others, va'afilu b'veisam, and even in their homes. So let's say you have a fellow who's a caterer, and he forgot to make an eiruv tavshilin. So he can't cook for his own family. He can't go ahead and cook. He has no head to cook. He didn't make an eiruv tavshilin. But he also can't go to his catering job and go to somebody else's house where he was supposed to make the Yom Tov meals for them. He can't do that in the Shabbos meals. He can't go on Yom Tov and prepare the Shabbos meals for somebody else. Now let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah over here. Mishnah Berurah is cut nun vav. Mi shaloi eiruv, somebody who neglected to make an eiruv tavshilin. Now the Chavetz Chaim just points out, v'davke echad me'anshe ir she'ena nitpal le'isasai u'letavshiloi shel chaveroi. When we speak about somebody who neglected to make an eiruv tavshilin, and therefore he has this challenge of what to do, we're talking about an independent person. We're not speaking about somebody who's nitfal, somebody who is attached to somebody else's cooking. For example, let's say it's Yom Tov and you have guests in your home for Yom Tov. Your guests don't need an eiruv tavshilin. They're dependent on you, so they're dependent on your eiruv tavshilin. They don't have to make their own independent one. So that's what the Chavetz Chaim is pointing out over here. When we speak about somebody who has a challenge because he didn't make an eiruv tavshilin, v'davke echad me'anshe ir she'ena nitva le'isasai u'letavshilin shel chaveroi. We're speaking about somebody from the city who somehow is not attached to anybody else's eiruv tavshilin. Aval ishta yu b'nei beisai shel adam, but somebody's wife and somebody's family members. Kevin she'irev ha'balabayis, once the balabayis makes an eiruv tavshilin, heim nitvalin lai, they are attached to him. Umutar lavashel, and they could go make a coffee. I mean, not make a coffee that you're allowed to do on Yom Tov. They could go cook something. If they want to put up something for Shabbos on Yom Tov, they're allowed to. Aval bishaloi ervu la'atzman klal, even though they didn't make their own independent eiruv tavshilin. They don't have to. You, as the balabayis of the home, you made an eiruv tavshilin. You began your Shabbos preparations before Yom Tov. Now you could complete them on Yom Tov, and that goes for your whole household. And when you made the eiruv tavshilin, you did not have to hand it off to somebody else and ask that person to be zocheh in the eiruv on behalf of your family members. Your family members are nitval to you. They're attached to you. They go after you. Ois cut nun zayin. So the halacha that the Mechaber said was, not only is somebody who doesn't have an eiruv tavshilin, not only is it usher for him to cook for himself, he's also not allowed to cook for acherim. La'acherim, he's not allowed to cook for other people. Va'afilu bebeisam, he can't even go over to their homes and cook in their homes for them. Says the Mishnah Berurah here, nice cotton on Zion, Kamash Malon, what the Mechaber is teaching us over here, the Chiddush that the Mechaber is teaching us is, the loyam rinon, we do not say, Kevan shehem ervu, let's say Ruvain is the caterer. Ruvain forgot to make an eiruv tavshilin. Ruvain is supposed to go over to the Goldbergs, and he's supposed to put up the Shabbos meals on Erev Shabbos, on Yom Tov, for the Goldbergs. Now, the Goldbergs made an Erev tavshilin. Even though they have a caterer making their meals for them, maybe they're like their own cholent. So they were planning on putting up their own cholent. They made an Erev tavshilin. So the chiddush over here is, the loyam rinon, we do not say, Kevan shehem ervu, since the Goldbergs made their own Erev tavshilin, v'yecholim levasha la'atzman, so they are allowed to cook for themselves on Yom Tov for Shabbos. Maybe yecholim lasei shliach avuran, so maybe they can make Ruvain a shliach. They themselves are allowed to cook for themselves. Why can't they make Ruvain a shliach to do their cooking for them? Why should it upset them that Ruvain doesn't have an Erev tavshilin? The answer is no. That's what the Mechaber is telling me. No. Since Ruvain doesn't have an Erev tavshilin, he's not allowed to cook. Tekevin shehula yirev, since Ruvain did not make an Erev tavshilin, isura rami alei levashel. There is an isser on him to cook. It is usher for him to cook. It doesn't matter if it's for him or for somebody else. He is not allowed to cook. Now we continue with the words of the Mechaber, 3 lines down by the Ois Katan Nun Ches for the Mishnah Berurah. Continues the Mechaber. V'gam acherim asurim levashel loy. Again, Ruvain didn't make an Erev tavshilin, so maybe Ruvain will say, all right, listen, I forgot to make an Erev tavshilin, so my wife is going to go call in the neighbor is going to do us a favor, she's going to come over to our house, she's going to do the cooking for us. No, the Mechaber says you're not allowed to do that. The neighbor who made an Erev tavshilin is not allowed to come into your house, take your food, and cook your food for you. And in the lashon of the Gemara says in Be'an Yud Zayin, I think it's Yud Zayin and Aleph, the Gemara says, Hu nesar, he is aser, he's not allowed to cook on Yom Tov for Shabbos if he didn't make an Erev tavshilin. V'kimchai aser, and his flour doesn't only mean his flour, it means all of his food is also nesar. All of his food becomes aser, his food is not allowed to be cooked. He is not allowed to cook, and his food is not allowed to be cooked. And the Gemara says that that's a knas. There's a knas on him. He didn't make an Erev tavshilin, now he's not allowed to cook, and his food is not allowed to be cooked. And therefore continues the Mechaber, and the Mechaber says, Ve'ein loy takana. There's no help for this person to have food for Shabbos. Ela sheyiten kimchai v'tavshilai la'acherim she'ervu b'matana. The only thing he could do is he could take his ingredients, he could take his raw materials, and he could give it to somebody who did make an Erev tavshilin as a matana. I'm giving you a gift. Here's my chicken, here's my vegetables, here's my flour, here's everything. And then that person, now those individuals who made an eruv tavshilin, they could take those ingredients and they can cook and they can bake, and they could give the finished products back to you. But you have to give your ingredients to them as a matana, so that they're cooking their food. They're cooking their food, and then they give it back to you on Yom Tov. And if he does do this, if he gives his ingredients as a matana to somebody who did make an Erev tavshilin, they could cook even in his house. But they're cooking their own stuff because they got it as a matana. They could do the cooking even in the house of the person who neglected to make the Erev tavshilin. Says the Mishnah Berurah. Ice cotton. We didn't do nun ches. Ice cotton nun ches. So he said v'gam acherim, other people are not allowed to cook for the person who neglected to make an Erev tavshilin. Ritzayna loymar afilu b'veisam. They're not allowed to cook for him even if they're doing the cooking in their own houses. So the Goldbergs who made the Erev tavshilin, they cannot take Ruvain's ingredients and cook for Ruvain even if they're doing it in the Goldberg house. Not allowed to do it. They're not allowed to cook for Ruvain. They're not allowed to cook using Ruvain's raw materials. They can't use his ingredients. If they want to cook their own food, if they heard that Ruvain is up a creek because he didn't make an Erev tavshilin and he doesn't have a cholent, so they want to be very nice and they want to take their own potatoes, their own beans, their own barley, their own meat, their own onion, and they want to make a cholent and give it to Ruvain. Okay, fine. Tavei aleim bracha. They could go ahead and they could do that, but they cannot go ahead and take Ruvain's raw ingredients. And you can see this in the Shar Hatzion Ice Cotton Pei Dalid. De'ilu mikemach shalohem, if the Goldbergs want to use their own raw materials, bavadai mutarim heim. That's certainly mutter, but they can't take Ruvain's ingredients and cook Ruvain's ingredients for him. So that's here, Ois Katan and Tes Lavasha Loi, they can't cook for him, Ainu Mikim Chai, using his flour, using his raw materials. Da'af Shehem Ervu, because even though they, the Goldbergs, made an eiruv tavshilin, Loihota Lahem Likach Kemach Shaloi, they're not allowed to take Ruvain's flour, they can't take Ruvain's raw ingredients. The Gam Kimchai Nesar, because Ruvain's flour became asr, like I told you for the Gemara in Beitza. Hu Nesar v'Kimchai Nesar. Kolzman Shu Shaloi, as long as the ingredients belong to Ruvain, they remain asr. They cannot be cooked or baked. But if he gives them as a matana to the Goldbergs, now it's no longer his. Now it's the Goldbergs. Then they could cook it and they could bake it. Ais Katan Samach. So the Mechaber said that the takana is that he should give his kamach, he should give his ingredients la'acherim to other people she'ervu who made an eiruv tavshilin b'matana, and he has to give it to them as a matana, as a gift. Says the Chavetz Chaim over here, we're talking about a real bona fide gift. Hainu b'mishicha l'rishusam. The Goldbergs have to go ahead and make an actual kinyan. They have to go to take it out of Ruvain's rishus. So they have to go into Ruvain's house. They have to take the bag of beans and the sack of potatoes and the onions, and they have to do kinyan mishicha. They have to pull it out of Ruvain's rishus and bring it to their rishus. Or they could just make a kinyan hagbah. They could just pick it up at tefach in Ruvain's house, having das to be koinit, and now it belongs to them. But the ilu b'kinyan sudar, if you want to use a kinyan tachlipin, that's where you exchange something, where Mr. Goldberg will take his handkerchief and give it to Ruvain, and Ruvain will make a kinyan on the handkerchief, and now when Ruvain makes a kinyan on the handkerchief, Mr. Goldberg is kind of the beans and the potatoes and the barley and the onions. That you're not allowed to do on Yom Tov, even in this scenario. And the reason that's brought down is because that's nirem mamish kemekach umemkar. That looks too much like mekach umemkar, which would be aser on Yom Tov. Now the truth is, typically, giving a matana is also something which is aser on Yom Tov. However, over here, this is mutter because it's considered a tzarech mitzvah. This is the only way this fellow is going to have a cholent for his Shabbos Suda. So it's tzarech mitzvah. We were matir that they should be able to give him. He should be able to give his food as a matana. Okay. Continues the Mechaber. Right by the Ois Katan Samach Aleph for the Mishnah Berurah. By me, it's 3 lines up near the end of the line. Now, what happens if Ruvain neglected to make an eiruv tavshilin? He doesn't have an eiruv tavshilin to rely on, and he doesn't have any neighbors who made an eiruv tavshilin. Like I said, he lives alone in the wilderness, so he doesn't have an eiruv tavshilin. What does he do now? If he doesn't have anybody who made an eiruv that he could give his food to and that person could cook for him, what does he do? There are those that say shamuter le'efais b'tzimtzum pas echad, that it's mutter for him to make exactly 1 pas, 1 bread, ulavashel kedera achas, and to cook up 1 pot of food, ulahadlik ner echad, and to light 1 candle. Says the Mishnah Berurah over here, Ois Katan Samach Aleph. V'mein sham acherim. The Mechaber says, what do you do if there is nobody else around here who made an eiruv tavshilin? V'achreinim iskimu, the achreinim agree, ta'afilu yesh sham acherim, even if there are others who did make an eiruv tavshilin nearby. Elishena writes a lot this lemeizatam, but he doesn't want to use the Mechaber's eitzah. The Mechaber's eitzah was, go to somebody else who made an eiruv tavshilin, give him your raw material as a matana, they'll cook and bake, and they'll give you the food. This fellow doesn't want to do that. Why doesn't he want to do it? Well, first of all, maybe he doesn't want to do it. He doesn't know these people. Maybe he's afraid they're going to take his ingredients, they're going to cook it, and they're going to enjoy it, and they're not going to give it back. After all, it's a bona fide matana that he's giving. So if he doesn't want to do it, it's mutter for him to bake 1 bread. Nevertheless, it would be far more proper that he should be makneh his ingredients to others, Very practical problem. If you're going to rely on the heter that you yourself are allowed to bake one bread for Shabbos, well, then you're not going to have lechem mishnah for Shabbos because you're only going to break one challah. We're not mating you to bake two challahs, only one. So you're not going to have lechem mishnah. But if you give your flour to a neighbor who made an eiruv tavshilin, they could bake two challahs for you, and then you'll have lechem mishnah. So certainly, absent a very strong reason, you should be willing to give your raw ingredients to somebody who made an eiruv tavshilin. That way you'll have lechem mishnah. Ois cotton samach beis, the Mechaber said, there are those that are matir that you could make betzimtzum pas echad. You could make exactly one pas. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Hainu afilu pas gadol. You're only allowed to make one, but you could make one very big one. You could make a suda, you know what do they call it? A suda challah, like by the Sheva Brachas, about a chasana. You could go make yourself one huge 5 pound. I know when my wife makes a suda challah, it's exactly 5 pounds. It's a whole batch of challah. So you can make one big suda challah. Shia daloi l'challah Shabbos, so that you should have plenty of challah for Shabbos. So you don't have to make a bilkala. You can make a very big challah. And we will matter this mishum kavod Shabbos, so that you should have the basic things that you need for kavod Shabbos. Upashit, and it's simple to understand. If you have leftover challah from Yom Tov, also mishum lechem mishnah, then there's no heter for you to bake. You have challah, so what heter is there for you to bake? Oh, I want to bake because I want to have lechem mishnah? No, we're not matter you to bake on Yom Tov for Shabbos absent an eiruv tavshilin, so that you should have lechem mishnah. Says the Rama, Haga, v'miniach eiruv. Let's say somebody did make an eiruv tavshilin, but he goofed. He made the bracha, he made the eiruv tavshilin, but he neglected to say the nusach of bahadein eiruva. V'miniach eiruv. If somebody made an eiruv, v'lo yizkir malachos behedya, and he did not mention the various malachas that the eiruv tavshilin is going to be matir. So he didn't mention lavashule, la'afuye, ladluke shraga. He didn't say these things. Ella, rather, Amar, all he said was, B'dein yehei shard lalamebad kol tzarchana. With this eiruv, it should be mutter for us to do all of our needs. Says the Rama, Hevi kimi shalai eiruv klal. It's as if he did not make an eiruv tavshilin at all, and his eiruv tavshilin is not effective. Says the Mishnah Berurah in Ois Cotton Samach Gimel, Hevi kimi shalai eiruv. It's as if he didn't make an eiruv. Techei tiktu chachamim, because this was part of the takanos chachamim. Sheyifarit ikrei hamalachos, that the person has to mention the ikar malachos that the eiruv tavshilin is coming to be matir. V'im perit rak miktsasai, and if he only mentioned some of them, kigan shama rak la'afuye. Let's say he only said that the eiruv should be matir baking, v'lo hiske bishol v'atmana, and he didn't mention cooking or insulating atmana. Asur bahem, so then it's also for him to do the ones that he did not mention. V'yesh chalkin alikar din zeh. There are those that argue on this halacha. U'sfir lehu, and they hold the ha'amira shel bahadein, that the saying, the reciting of this nusach, ain't rak l'mitzvah lechatchila. It's only a mitzvah lechatchila. Aval b'di'eved kevin she'niach hatavshil l'shem eiruv. Once you set aside a cooked dish to serve as the eiruv tavshilin, afilu lo yamar klal nusach shel bahadein eina ma'akiv. Even if you don't say this entire nusach of bahadein eiruva, it's not ma'akiv at all. Umuta lisbach alav lases kala malachis b'yantav l'shabbos, and you could rely on the eiruv tavshilin to do all of the malachis that you are required to do to prepare on Yom Tov for Shabbos. Uleinian halacha, says the Chavetz Chaim, as far as the halacha l'maisa, lechatchila yesh lahachmer kisfara harishayna. Certainly lechatchila, we should be machmir, like the first opinion over here, who says that you do need the recital of this nusach, and if you leave something out, you're not allowed to do it. Valkein, therefore, im nizkar kodim knisas leil Yom Tov. If you remember before Yom Tov begins, that you made the eiruv tavshilin, but you didn't say bahadein, yachzor v'yitlai laha eiruv b'yada, you should pick up the eiruv again, v'yarma nusach bahadein, and you should say the nusach of bahadein. But v'la yachzor v'yavar shenis, but you don't make a new bracha in kvar birach b'tchila. V'im nizkar be'eruv Shabbos, and if you only remember on Erev Shabbos, so now it's too late, you can't make an Erev tavshilin anymore. If you only remembered on Yom Tov, that's Erev Shabbos, that you didn't say bahadein, yak de kimchai la'acherim, you should give your raw materials to somebody else, v'hem yivashlu v'yitnu loi, and they'll cook and give you the food. And if you don't have anybody to hand it off to, then you could rely on this latter opinion that holds that the nusach of Bahadain is not ma'akiv at all. Sarach Dalet, it's not ma'akiv at all. I'm sorry, it's as if you didn't make an eiruv klal. It's as if you didn't make an eiruv at all. The Amar nusach Bahadain, but if you said the nusach of Hadain, actually birich betchila, but you forgot to make the bracha on the eiruv, ain't a ma'akiv. The bracha is not ma'akiv. The bracha is ein ma'akvos, because brachas are not ma'akiv in the performance, in the establishment of the eiruv tavshilin. Okay, we're going to stop over here. So we're holding in the middle of the Ramah on the top line, Kufdan Beis Amud Aleph by Umisha Misana B'Yomtiv. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The source of limud HaTorah should be Megan against Klal Yisrael. Rabban Hashem should send Yeshuas and Refuas and Parnasa. Rabban Hashem should send everything that everyone needs, and we should be zeichet together b'simcha to the Geula Shleima b'meher v'yameinu. Amen.